Hello and welcome to Cherry Red TV. I'm joined again today by Cherry Red Records founder and chairman Iain McNay for part 3 of our look at the history of this iconic independent record label. I should also say that you can see parts 1 and 2 on the Cherry Red TV website. Hi Iain.
Hi Matt.
No, at the end of part 2 we ended I think about 1991. And you'd just come back from a 4-year break where you hadn't been at the company. And when you came back, you kind of realised that you needed to take things in a slightly different direction than you had been before with regards to the way that the company was run and the kind of material it was releasing. Can you explain a little bit about that and how your kind of thought process led you to that decision?
Well, basically Cherry Red, since it started 15 years previously, whatever, had very much been run on the basis of new artists, new signings. The artists would put albums out and we would make our living out of selling those albums. Obviously you have singles as well, but you primarily as a record company, your income is from albums, and you license the albums out around the world and you hope that's a living which sustains your company. And the premise has somehow changed. I'm only away 4 years, but a lot changed during those 4 years. And the cost of breaking new acts was becoming more and more, the whole thing was more and more competitive. And to make it worse, there was a lot of major companies that were now starting their own independent labels, independent in name and image, but not independent in resources. And so the stakes were being upped in the whole independent market. And if you start to look at the independent chart, you would indeed find that quite a few of the records in there, even though they were independently distributed, were actually, labels were owned by major companies. Yeah. So it was different rules. And I could see fairly quickly that, and we had, I think, a couple of acts. There was Prolapse and Tsetse Fly, who actually did get in the independent charts, new artists, but the sales weren't what they were, and I could see that we were not going to build a sustainable business working at that kind of level. So I started to look around to see what else we could do, and I saw a big gap in the independent catalogue market. And I knew, obviously, from my history, having run the label for 15 years or so, I knew a lot of people in the industry on the independent side, and many of them actually didn't want to run their labels anymore. Either they'd doing something else with their life, they'd run out of money or whatever. So we had bought and acquired the rights to several independent labels. I remember there was the punk label No Future, there was Flick Knife, there was Red Rhino, Midnight Music, yeah, Intape. There was quite a few of them that we acquired the rights to. And then we went through that catalogue we'd acquired and re-looked at it in a very intelligent way to produce really good packages. We didn't just put out the same albums again. We had additional bonus tracks, much better packaging inside. So it was like an exciting new release to somebody, and it could be like a new discovery for them if they didn't know the artist. So we went into that market, and that actually did quite well for many years, kept us going in fact. We also licensed some material in, and Cherry Red became more of a catalogue and a collector's market company, as opposed to a company that was just doing new releases.
So on a practical level, did that have its own kind of different challenges to what had come before when you were signing and releasing new acts?
Well, yeah, when you change, there's obviously always an element of challenge there. There was less stress involved in the whole thing, as I think we all know. You sign a new act and you're enthusiastic, they're enthusiastic, and then maybe the first single doesn't get the airplay the act hoped, and they maybe become a bit disillusioned with things, and then the album, classic thing is the album comes out and the band breaks up. That didn't happen very often with us. It did happen sometimes though. So there's a big element of risk. Where the record's already been recorded essentially, that risk is taken away and you can focus more on the creative side and the practical side of getting that record out where people can find it to buy it.
And I think, as you say, you bought up quite a few labels, so you had a good base of catalogue to start exploiting there. And one of the first sort of ways that you came across for doing that was the Collector series, which I think the first one was started with the Punk Collector series. Can you explain a little bit about how that came together and what was kind of the thought process in terms of how you packaged and promoted those releases?
Well, it was Mark Brennan who came up with it. The way Tree Red was structured was it was always lots of people coming in out of the office, coming in for lunches or a drink after work or for a meeting or something. There was just a very small group of people who worked there, and we relied a lot on impulse from the outside as well. So Mark was one of those people that came in to see us every now and again. I think he'd just been made redundant from his previous job, and he had these ideas of re-looking at what we had to try and make something more of it. And so he said, do a Punk Collector series. It hasn't been done before. Make it CD Punk 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And we already have in the catalogue, of course, through our acquisitions and also through Anagram and Tree Red, some key punk releases. We had the Blitz album, which was top 30 key album. We had material by the end of the Upstarts, the Vibrators, all kinds of really good Bombay System, key punk acts, both from the first and second generation of punk. So Mark oversaw that, and what he was doing was he was looking at having not just the original album, but also bonus tracks, extra packaging, really good sleeve notes, extra pictures that weren't used before, just so the whole package looked special.
He was thinking almost as if he was trying to, think as a fan would, in terms of enticing them into, buying the original album again, but what else would they want on top of that?
Yeah, very much. It's the old thing, isn't it? If you're intelligent in business, what you do is you create something that you would want to buy yourself if you didn't have it. And that's what the thinking was. Yes, what can we create as fans of our music that we would buy ourselves? And to do that, you look around and you try and get the best that you can.
And then you went on to develop the Collector series idea. You had a Psychobilly series with bands like the Meteors, Demented Argo, Long Tall Texans, the Sharks. You had a Goth series, Alien Sex Fiends, Skeletal Family, Dance Society. So in a way that became sort of the mainstay of the release output in kind of those 90s years with these Collector series that you were developing.
Yes, that was a large part of our success during that time, and the series grew insofar as the more we did, the more we attracted, and the more ideas people wrote in with saying, it's a great series, why don't you try and get the rights to so and so and so. We started to license from certain major companies, some of the bigger acts, and it just worked. You could see it was working, and once you get to a certain stage, the whole back catalogue gets promoted by people buying and something new on that Collector series. They realised that I'd like to get something that came out a year ago on that series. So it was a very good way of doing things, and I think it was done in a very Tree Red way insofar as really trying to get the best input from the best people to get the best package.
And then you added another one to the Collector series in the mid-90s, which I think possibly to some people in the music industry at least, it would have surprised them that it went on to be very successful, which was the Football Collector series. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about?
Well, that was originally Mike Allway's idea, who was helping with L Records, had previously been the Tree Red A&R man a few years before that. And he had the idea of doing some football CDs, and we crystallised that down into doing it club by club. We thought football compilations aren't really going to work because football fans just want to hear basically the songs of their clubs. They don't care about songs of other clubs. Yeah. So what we did is we took the first 5 or 6, I think, were Arsenal, Tottenham, Everton, Newcastle, Everton, Liverpool, and then England, I think, was the 6th one. Yeah. I think West Ham was the 7th one. So we took those as projects and we tried to make them the most definitive football compilations for those clubs that we could think of. So Adam, who's now MD at Tree Red, big Arsenal fan, he made sure that we had every decent Arsenal track on there, and indeed even asked people that he knew do you want to, who are musicians, do you want to record a really good track for an Arsenal album? So there was some new stuff on there as well. And the same with Tottenham and Newcastle, we got fans involved, we got fanzines involved, we got local radio involved, and we really genuinely wanted them to be a great collection each. So it wasn't just a giveaway thing, it was something that represented a club over a period of many, many years. And I remember on the Liverpool CD, I was quite involved in that one, and there was a song that people kept talking to me about. I forget the name of the song, but it was a song about a young boy who was in the trenches in the First World War, the 1418 war, big Liverpool fan, and he would sing this song in the trenches. I'm told it was true, I don't know if it was true or not. And I couldn't anywhere find the lyrics or the version of that song, but I kept looking, and in the end someone came up and said, I've got on cassette a folk version of this song. So we put it on the album. We got great feedback from that. It's an example of how the research becomes actually very exciting, because you think, I've got to find that track. It's what Liverpool fans want on that album. We're going to somehow find it. You have to be detective almost and try and find out where it is and who's got the rights. So, and we did that. There's quite a few obscure tracks on those albums. The one Everton, again, was very obscure, which we ended up finding. So I think all the albums stand up. Some stand up musically better than others, and I still think musically one of the best we've done is West Ham, because you've got 3 Adrian Sherwood recorded tracks. Adrian was very leading edge on the whole dub side of things. You've got the quite heavy punk of the Business and Cockney Rebels.
Cockney Rejects.
Cockney Rejects, yeah. So, again, it's interesting, the albums aren't necessarily going to follow a musical pattern. We're trying to get the best songs about the club. So musically, they're a bit all over the place, but they stand up. And I know that fans love playing them on the way to away games, for instance. Now, when we had them, what the challenge was then was how do we sell them, because the record shops did not know what to do with them. So we had to sell a lot direct to mail order. Where we could, we got the club shops to take them. We got the fans in to sell them. We got the fan stalls near the club, near where the stadium is, they sold them. So we were using different outlets, and it took about a year or two for the football stores to cotton on. There's a market here, and start their own sections, football sections. And when they did, I'd go in the stores and then all our records in there. But that took time and hard work to get records shops convinced there's a market here for football records. But I think for most of us in the office, it was a wonderful combination of 2 things we love, football and music. You bring them together and you create the best you can out of them. And we actually kept it going for many years, and we've done about 60 now. And we've done nearly all the big clubs and quite a few of the smaller clubs. With the smaller clubs, we had to create a lot more tracks, which we got fans to do, some bands we were involved in to do, and also some interviews with key players and managers just to fill it up so there was value for money there. It's a lot harder to do now because we've done all the best songs, really, and football clubs, how can I say this? Let's say that their deals are much more demanding now in terms of...
They're a bit more savvy on the merchandise,
yeah. So they make it very difficult for us to operate on this now.
But that kind of link between football and Cherry Red is something that kind of goes beyond just that football collector series, isn't it?
Yes, I think one of those things is that we all love, well, I say we all, most of us in the office love going to football matches, and when my old team I used to support, Wimbledon FC, who's now, of course, AFC Wimbledon, when Wimbledon are away too far for me to go to the match, I go and watch a local match, a non-league match. So we got very involved with non-league. We ended up being the shirt sponsor of Kingston FC for 4 years when they were playing in the Ryman League and the conference. So we also, for a few years, or still do, sponsored leagues. So we sponsored the Chiltonian League, which was, I think, a sort of 6th, 7th step league, and then the Hellenic League, and now the Combined Counties League, and also the Middlesex County League. And we also sponsor various magazines, non-league magazines. There's a Welsh one we sponsor, the non-league listing one we sponsor, and a couple of books. So, and of course we sponsor the AFC Wimbledon Stadium. So we're very into putting something back into football because we love football. And if we make some money out of football, let's put it back into football, especially grassroots football. And I gather, although I'm too old to get selected now, I gather the Cherry Red football team, although it hasn't played for a little bit, has a whole cabinet full of cups in the office, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Very successful.
Very successful in its time, yeah. Yeah.
And didn't have ringers, did it? It had genuine
No,
players
genuine staff from the office,
yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
And when they played, they took no prisoners, did they?
There was a few yellow cards handed out, shall we say.
Yeah.
But yeah, very successful.
I must tell a story about this. This goes before your time. I remember in the early days of Cherry Red, when Mike Hallway was the A&R man, it's absolutely true, we had our offices in Westbourne Grove, and Tuesday night we used to, all of us, including the girls in the office, it was a nice evening, used to go and play football in Hyde Park, which is just a few minutes down the road. And obviously it was just, you know, you put a few clothes for the goals, nothing too organised, and the pitch wasn't marked, there's no referee obviously. And often be 20 people there. We'd invite artists, we'd invite some journalists, and people from our distribution company, even our lawyer and accountant came once. And we'd play football for an hour or so and then we'll go for the pub. It was all very, a very nice evening. Well, what Michael Hallway, he was A&R man, the A&R man used to do was, he used to invite people he was thinking of signing to the label to see what they were like on the football pitch. And it wasn't so much he wanted to see what their football skill was like, he wanted to see what their commitment was. And his theory was if they weren't committed on the football field, they wouldn't be committed for their careers as an artist. And I know a couple of people he didn't sign.
Oh, really?
Because of lack of commitment. And I thought, interesting way to evaluate people, and probably a lot of truth in it.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. But certainly the monochrome set used to play. Ben Watt played a couple of times. Tracy Thorne was sitting on the sidelines. Adrian Sherwood played. There was a lot of people involved with the with Cherry Red as artists in the early days that played for that team.
So we're here in sort of, you know, the mid to late 1990s. You've changed kind of how the company operates in terms of looking at the more catalogue release side of things, and that's going pretty well. And Adam Velasco, who you mentioned before, at the end of the 90s, you make a decision to appoint Adam managing director, and you move over into the role of chairman. Was that something that was a significant step for you personally, and how did it kind of affect the day-to-day running of the company?
Well, after I had my sabbatical, I didn't come in the office for 4 years, which we mentioned at the beginning of the interview. I was coming in the office fairly regularly, but I could see that I was becoming less and less interested in the day-to-day running of the company. I wanted to move on somehow. And Adam had come up from the role of office junior, had great ideas, he was enthusiastic, reliable, and I've always believed if you can, that you promote from inside. You give people maybe a challenge slightly beyond their obvious reach. And I thought with Adam, I thought he could easily rise to it. I don't know if he was so sure at the time, so I said, why don't you be managing director and run the company? And he took the challenge, and he's done exceptionally well since then, and he's taken Cherry Red to places that were beyond where I would have taken them in terms of the time commitment and to some extent the vision as well. It's worked out really well. It's been a long relationship, but a very good relationship. And I think it reflects the whole attitude, the way we do things, that people start with us, they find what could be their role, and if they have a talent for it, an aptitude for it, they're given a chance, can you make that role really work into your full-time job?
And I must confess to the viewer at this point that I start to have a personal involvement in the company's history. I did join at the beginning of the year 2000. And over that time that I've been there, we've kind of added a large stable of satellite labels, which encompass a whole range of different musical styles. The first one of those was RPM Records, which came in, I think, mid-99. So can you explain kind of how that process has kind of developed in the company?
Yes, well, RPM was a change because it was an established catalogue company run by 3 people, including Mark Stratford. His 2 partners left, and he was struggling on his own to make the whole thing work, based in Oxford, and somehow it was an obvious potential for a fit with Cherry Red. And it was Keith West, who's a friend of mine, who had products out on RPM, who tipped me off that this might be right for a meetup. And it took it time to find the deal that worked for both sides. But now it works really, really well, and Mark's obviously still with us 14 years later, whatever. And he basically looks after all the creative side, decides who we sign, what we put out, looks after the design of the covers and how things are marketed. And we do everything else in terms of the radio promotion, the pressing, the contractual side, the royalty side. So it plugs in the Cherry Red system, and that's what these other labels do now. They plug in different ways to the system central hub that we have. And it means that we can take an organisation that might have less or more than someone else we've taken, because there's different points that can be plugged in.
And they all kind of bring, you know, something new in a way, something that has its own richness that the company didn't have before in its output. I guess with RPM, there was a lot of kind of iconic 60s artists like Spencer Davis Group, Paul Jones, Twinkle, Jackie DeShannon, and then leading on into the 70s, we did a whole reissue campaign on Leo Sayers albums. And then we moved through to Rivoli, which came through Joe Foster, which I believe had originally been part of Creation Records. Yeah,
what happened was that I'd known Joe and Alan McGee for many, many years. I knew Alan before he started Creation. And Rivoli was their catalogue side, which Joe ran part-time. He ran that. And when Creation was finally bought by EMI, wasn't it, that bought it?
Sony.
Sony bought it then, that's right. The Rivoli side, the catalogue side, was closed down, so Joe was sort of out of a job, if you like. So we got talking, and we just decided to revise Rivoli as a Cherry Red imprint. So we took some of his old releases over and relicensed them, and then developed that. And I think we built it up to about 150 releases fairly quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
There's some fascinating. There's maybe some obvious stuff there, but there's some very non-obvious stuff as well, like Ivor Cutler. 2 of the first 3 albums were Ivor Cutler, which is certainly an acquired taste, but something that's very, for me, iconic in its own way. And another example here, Joe was an ex-artist, ex-producer. Give him the scope to do the creative side. We hold on to the business side, and that works well between the 2 parties.
And I think probably one of the you know, well, certainly one of the most successful of those satellite labels that we've bought in recent times would be Esoteric.
Yes.
Which was previously operating under the name of Eclectic Records. And I think, as you say, the ability to kind of plug the expertise of Mark and Vicky Powell in terms of their A&R, almost their fan involvement in the progressive rock and psychedelic rock genres into the business element of what we do has been a fantastic match.
It has. They brought something that was rare insofar as it's like they have the maximum in terms of ability on everything they do, because they're incredible workers. Their knowledge is just extraordinary. They have a great relationship with acts. They have good instinct, and the way they present their packaging is also superb. And also because they know so many people, their promotion is very good. So you feel with them it's a kind of a 10 out of 10 on almost every department that they work on with us. And so that's a very strong one for us. And they actually, I think, release about 8 to 10 albums a month, don't they?
Yeah, they do, yeah.
It's a very high release schedule.
And again, you know, some fantastic names in there. We've had Cherry Red acquired an awful lot of material from Hawkwind, who
Yes.
of course are legendary within that genre.
Yes.
And Mark and Vicky have done a great job on reissuing and
Yeah.
repackaging a lot of their back catalogue.
Yes.
You know, we've had the likes of Soft Machine, Barclay James Harvest, Man, some real icons of that genre really that have come through.
Yeah, Jack Bruce box set I think was another kind of moment where we felt we'd done something special release-wise.
Yeah.
And now the whole Tangerine Dream thing, there's a big box set we put out there and working through their catalogue, and we've just signed lots of catalogue from Todd Rundgren, hasn't been released, worked through that. So it really is one thing after the other.
I think it's almost become, you know, sort of the must label for fans of that type of music.
Yeah, and it's just so interesting to look about how it came along, because the Cherry... people often say to me, well, what's the Cherry Red vision for the next few years? And in a way, there isn't a vision. It's not as if we're completely visionless, but things come along and things create themselves. And with Mark and Vicky Powell, we talked to them for nearly 2 years before it came off. You know, they were with somebody else, they were obviously talking to other people, and then it was obviously the right time for it to work with us, so we got that together fairly quickly, and it's blossomed fairly quickly. But it's not as if we have a list and we must acquire them. It doesn't work that way. It's the same with RPM and Rivoli, and there's Lemon Records, who you may come on to again. That was Ross Lando, who came with the idea, ended up doing 150 releases.
Classic rock genre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the whole way we work. We're very much open to anything, and we get probably approached on a label idea now every week. And some we try, and there's some that have had 2 or 3 releases. We've liked the people, liked the product. It hasn't worked, so we have to knock it on the head. There's no point in keeping it going in terms of an unviable business. It doesn't work for both sides. So there is this very much this with Cherry Red. Very much this dedication to really following through ideas that come along that we think could work, and let's see, can they work? And we do our bit, and it either works or it doesn't work.
And alongside sort of bringing in these satellite labels, the company has also developed in-house an awful lot of labels itself over the last 10 years or so. One that was kind of already there and that we spoke about in part 1 of the story would have been L Records, which is run by Mike Olway, which kind of towards the end of the 90s kind of almost stopped. There was no new material coming through there, and Mike's kind of very cleverly resurrected that. You know, he's kind of taken the, without getting into too much detail, the public domain recordings, which are things that are kind of 50 years after they're initially recorded. And from my point of view, he's repackaged and really mined those areas, you know, from the 40s, 50s, even as far back as the 30s in some cases, and created some great material for us.
Yeah, it's another niche where somehow you feel it fits into Cherry Red. And Mike, we've had a long relationship with him, bit up and down at times. He did leave at one time, stole part of the roster and went to Warner Brothers, but we forgave him when he came back. And we like him, and he's a creative person. He works very, very hard. And he's doing something different, and that's another thing about Cherry Red. We love people that are doing something generally different, have a passion for that. And while there's a market for L Records, we'll keep it going. And then he seems to find, every year he seems to find one big one, which somehow encourages you to look for the big one for the next year.
And we've kind of developed what was the original collector series concept into almost another level now. We've got much bigger acts that we're able to access material from. So we've got labels like 70s,
yes,
which has been the sort of glam and pop from that decade,
yeah,
where you're looking at, you know, very big acts. You've got Glitter Band, Shawaddy Waddy, Mud, Bay City Rollers, the Osmonds. You know, they've kind of really taken on a life of their own now, those labels, in terms of the level of acts that we've been able to access.
Yeah, the strange thing for me is that in the 70s I worked for Bell Records for a few years, and of course many of those acts on our 70s label, the Glitter Band, Shawaddy Waddy, Barry Blue, the Pearls, Bay City Rollers were all on Bell Records, and I worked on all those records. Well, I was more on the financial side. I wasn't promoting them as such, but I worked at that company when those records all came out. Drifters was another one, and they're all in the 70s series. And I think it's brilliant that I've been able to, because I had a relationship with certain members of those bands, and that's been carried forward, and we're now putting those records out. And at the time, those records were not always highly regarded by collectors. It was seen as kind of throwaway teeny bop, but there's some great songs there, and now a lot of that material is collectible, and that's the interesting thing. And of course, I say of course, you wouldn't know this, but Bell Records was actually for a time next door to Rack Records. Bell Records was number 3 Charles Street, and Rack was number 2 Charles Street. And of course at Rack you had next door Susie Quatro, for instance, who now, not only who was on 70s, we've now signed for her new album. And indeed, our last interview at Cherry TV, she was on the sofa there talking about her career. So it's this full circle where we're going, really, in terms of our influences and our loves going back a long, long time, and then actually working with these artists on Cherry Red.
And I think one of the labels that probably personifies the interaction that we have as a record company with collectors and fans is one that you initially started yourself, which should be the Cherry Pop label.
Right.
Which is our kind of 80s pop soul kind of offering. A lot of the releases there have been as a result of suggestions from fans.
Yes, very much so. Well, that's always been the case, that we try and put on virtually every release. If you've got an idea for a release, do email us in, because that's how we get so many ideas these days. They're not always practical, but we do follow them all up. And Cherry Pop's in an obvious one, and it was even a girl, Becky, who was temporary in the office, that came up with the name Cherry Pop. We were brainstorming one evening and had a couple of drinks, I think. It's an 80s label, it's pop. She said, well, Cherry Pop's obvious, isn't it? Cherry Pop it was, that's where it came from. And then I think we started with, was it Kim Wilde and LaToya Jackson?
Yeah, Sheena Easton was early on as well.
And it's really developed from there, very much Hazy Fantasy. It's very much developed from there with ideas coming in. And the Kim Wilde, I think we've worked through most of her catalogue.
Yeah, about 4 or 5 albums.
Yeah. And again, it's fans who work for us doing the packaging, advising on the bonus tracks. So we're getting the best definitive packages we can for those artists. And most of them are with major labels, and the major labels are licensing the material to us.
And again, talking about that full circle of yourself personally, we've had a lot of involvement with PWL, which was Pete Waterman's label, that kind of takes you back to the 70s as well, because you knew Pete in those days.
Well, yeah, before I started Cherry Red, my last job was working at a company called Magnet Records, who had people like Howard, Stardust and Darts, and I knew Pete. He worked there as assistant A&R man, so Pete and I go back many, many moons, yeah. Another full circle, that's right, yeah.
And very quickly, I mean, when I first joined, we were probably doing 10 albums a month, something like that, and within 6 or 7 years, we're doing 50, 60, at its height, even 70 plus records
yes,
a
it's
month.
Physical records.
Yeah, physical album releases. It's quite a challenge, you know. We're not a big company by any means.
We're 11 people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not there half the time. So how do you all do it then?
And again, you know, we're always looking to bring in new catalogue that we can exploit in those ways. We've done some great deals in recent years. We've done the whole Link and Head music catalogue, which brought in more of that great punk material, Exploited and Anti-Nowhere League and Demented Argo and King Kurt on the psychobilly, rockabilly side. Hawkwind, which we mentioned before, we brought in a lot of their catalogue. And I think one that we really liked bringing in was the Dandelion label.
Yes.
Which was initially started by John Peel back in the early 70s.
With Clive Selwood, yes.
Which again has brought some fantastic artists, you know, Clifford T. Ward and Bridget St. John. Yeah. It's been a fantastic journey really over the last 10 years in terms of the breadth of material that we've been putting out.
Yeah, and we did a sort of definitive box set with Down the Line, which I think we all enjoy working on, and gradually worked through their classic albums. And again, where we could, we worked with the artists to get their input, their bonus tracks they thought. And we even found some. You and I went down to Clive's garage one day, didn't we, Clive?
We did, yeah.
And dug out some old tapes.
Dusty old barn.
And got some bonus tracks for releases there. So it is a question of, when you get a project, how can you make it the best project you can? I think that's what one of the attitudes at Cherry Red. Okay, we do a lot of stuff where we're very busy, but we still retain that desire to maximise the project and get the best, because in the day we're all fans, and we want the fans to really realise and to really experience that we did the best by doing what we could.
And I think one thing that's been very important to the company, you know, going back to the very early days, has been kind of being at the forefront of new areas, new developments. And over the last sort of 10 or 15 years, that's been very much something that we've taken on, starting with the introduction of the book department, which is something that came from your own initiative. I know that you're a very passionate reader yourself. So was that a kind of natural step to introduce a book element to what we did?
Well, Cherry Red Books started because I couldn't get anybody else to do what I wanted to read, because I was the one that came up with the idea for the original independent charts that started at the beginning of 1980. And you know, nowadays everybody talks about indie charts, but then it didn't exist, the independent charts. So I kind of helped to get that together. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to have all those early charts in a book? I spoke to publishers and nobody wanted to do that. So I thought the only option I had was to put it out ourselves. So I formed Cherry Red Books to put this book out, Indie Hits, which was the first 20 years, I think it was, of the independent charts. Or was it the first 10 years?
10 years, I think.
First 10 years. It didn't sell that great. It's still available, but I'm happy it came out. And then one thing led to another, and then we got offered a book that a real fan, a guy who was an architect, wrote about Mott the Hoople. And it was well written. I thought, that's great for us. It's a fan who's written it. Hasn't had a book published before. We'll put it out. And that's in a way a lot of what Cherry Red Books has been. Fans writing for fans, and they're not necessarily professional authors, but their writing is fine. And we haven't put out so many, maybe 40 or 50 books. We're now putting them out on e-books, some of the books. But that is developing, and it sits alongside the record label on the DVD side as a companion, because lots of crossover between the book details and the records we put out.
And as you say, the DVD side, something that has developed from the turn of the millennium. And I think we're one of, or maybe even the first independent label to do a DVD release.
I think the Johnny Cash we put out and the Dead Kennedys were the first two, yeah.
And now we've kind of grown that to over 200 releases.
Yes.
Some great stuff in there from the likes of Poison, Mark Almond, The Fall, Traffic. You know, again, kind of reflecting what we do on the record side. There's a great breadth to what we do there.
Yeah, we also have the obscure punk bands, the Nights in Gaza and Monica and Set, so they're not all big names, but I think that's what we also like doing. We like putting out a DVD of a band that's relatively obscure because no one else will do it. And I think that's another philosophy of Cherry Red, that we all have our labours of love and we're not daft, but if we really like something in the office and we think we can just about break even, we'll do it. You can't do every release that way, obviously, when you wouldn't have a business plan, but some of those DVDs have come out, I put out. I knew they'd be very marginal, but they're out there, and that's brilliant.
Yeah, because a lot of it is the only material that exists of those bands.
And it's part of music history, the independent music history.
And alongside the catalogue side of what we've done over the last 15, 20 years, we've also carried on working with new material by existing artists that were already part of the label. I'm talking about people like Lawrence, who was Felt and Denim and is now Go-Kart Mozart. People like Martin Newell or Momus. How important was it, alongside doing that catalogue work, to keep supporting the work of those artists that have been long-term members of the Cherry Red family?
Yeah, well, it's Adam that's kept the whole thing with Lawrence going from felt denim, go-kart Mozart, and you know, Lawrence is a real character, and Adam has had to be remarkably patient. He's completely respective of the way Lawrence does things, and we've always got our record out in the end, but it's maybe 2 years after it was first put on the release schedule, so you will have to credit Adam for that one. But Lawrence is for me, he's a legend, and he's very proud to have his records out on Through Cherry Red. The Nick Curry one was quite interesting. I always got on well with Nick on Momus, and he's been very prolific. He wanted his own label, and kind of most record companies think, artist, have his own label, doesn't sell that many records, forget it. But no, we gave him a sensible budget and said, Nick, you've got to be businesslike about it. And to give him his due, he did okay with the label. He had this band Stereo Total, had the UK rights. That's done really well for us. He's had a few things that haven't sold as well, I have to say, but overall it's just about worked. And he's one of the rare people, I think, artist-wise, you can work with, and he's straight with you. Yeah. He's not going to say the album's going to cost £2,000 and it costs 15 grand.
And particularly, I guess, in the last 5 or 6 years, we've started to blaze a trail into the new world of digital.
Yes.
Which, you know, as an industry, we've all kind of had to adapt to, and some have been a little bit slower than others. I think, to give us our credit, we've been at the forefront of, you know, of being involved in that area. You know, I think we were one of the first labels to have our catalogues digitally for sale, where people can go and download them. We're certainly one of the first labels to be involved with ringtones.
Yeah.
And that's led on to things like Cherry Red TV as we sit here. Yeah. You know, we're almost kind of anticipating the future, if you like, in terms of what the next wave of technology is going to be, and where our content can fit into that.
Yeah, I think as the whole thing progresses, we're in I think our 34th or 35th year now. It's a question of where can you take things in areas, in new areas that still motivate and excite people. And I think what we do pretty well in terms of the standard things of putting records out. As we've gone into detail, we're trying to do the best we can, and we do them in new ways where possible. The technology is increasing very fast now. We don't really know where it's going as such. The sad thing is, from my point of view, is that certain people, especially younger people, don't really realise the value of paying for music. Music is free for them, not all of them, but some of them. And that is not really going to stack up in terms of a sustainable model for artists, songwriters, performers, and certainly record companies and publishers. Money has to come in from somewhere to help those people live. But certainly Cherry Red TV has been a good experiment. We've done, you and I between us have done interviews with probably 20 or 30 label owners over the years. I think you've done people like Simon from Belly Union,
Saul from Nude Records.
Yeah. And I've done lots of these smaller independent labels, No Future, Survival, Jungle Records, forget them all now, but done quite a few which have been, and of course I did Charlie Gillett from Oval Records, who sadly died a few months afterwards. So that, you know, it's great when that is done, and you know that that's the end record of him talking about his label. So that's something that interests certainly me, and I think you, to put on record how people have done it, how they did it all those years ago, because it wasn't so easy at times having your own independent label. It still isn't. So that's one of the things that Cherry Red TV loves to do, and also interviewing certain artists. I know you did Alvin Stardust, I did Susie Quattro, and also lesser-known artists like Martin Newell has been on Cherry Red TV, just to show different aspects of how somebody earns a living out of doing music. I remember one time having lunch with Martin and telling me how little he earned a year, and being quite proud the fact he can actually survive on what he earns, and being even more proud that he can live on that, and he's doing exactly what he wants to do in his life. Such an important thing, to do exactly what you want to do in your life, if you can.
Yeah, and an area often overlooked by the sort of wider media, who are now kind of chasing the digital revolution, is these kind of almost artists that run their own little cottage industry, and make a living out of it, you know, and and their ability to kind of motivate and react to their fan base is really what drives the whole thing.
I'm thinking now of Otway, John Otway, who we put out some records, we've done DVD. He was also on a book, and he was also on Cherry Red TV, and he's a remarkable character. A man, let's say, he admits it, limited talent musically, but great enthusiasm. He's a showman. He's working all the time, booking his own gigs. He's nearly 60 now, still making a living out of it. That, for me, is an inspiration. People like that. TV Smith's the same.
Yeah.
Works very hard, books his own gigs and makes a living. And in our own way, Cherry Red do the same. We've got no huge acts. We've got no million sellers, never have had. But we've got a lot of artists that we work with on different levels, doing great things, who we were in partnership with. And we're all making a living, and we're all doing what we want to do. We should mention that we've signed The Fall, Marquis Smith.
We have indeed, yeah. Over the last, I think, probably 18 months, 2 years, we've almost developed a new strand to what we've done, which is working with new material by established artists, the likes of The Fall, who we released I think it's their 29th album, the end of last year. Yeah. People like Susie Quattro, as you mentioned before, we did a new album with her. Yeah. Red Box, who, you know, first album for 20 years.
We had a single with them 25 years ago.
Yeah. People like Mark Almond, who we've now done, I think, 2 or 3 new albums by over the last few years. Van der Graaf Generator. Yeah. I mean, it's been very exciting, I have to say, being involved with new material. But I guess in a way it's also been a very different challenge to an office that became sort of more accustomed to working in the catalogue way.
Yes, well, isn't that part of running a small business? You need to have these new challenges to keep things fresh and move people forward. And yes, new artists are always demanding, whether they're old new artists or young new artists. You're always going to want more of your time than a catalogue release, of course. But as long as we can take them further and they can be happy, that's the important thing. It's like anything else. It's about, you know, well, one of the rules that we had at Cherry Red many, many years ago that I made was, we don't work with anyone we really don't want to work with. That doesn't mean to say we don't work with people that aren't difficult. People we work with are difficult. But this, you know, I won't name them, it's not fair, but there's certain people that I personally have some involvement with that I find difficult, but I still like them as people. Yeah. And I respect them. But if somebody becomes difficult and then nasty, that's it really. And that's the whole point, I think, of Cherry Red. We don't do things just to make money. And we know we get offered things that would do pretty well. They don't fit in musically. We know that people are, let's say, very difficult to work with. It's not our thing. It's kind of you do what motivates you and what you feel good at. And that's the way you can move a company forward and indeed people forward.
So here we are, as you say, 34 years into the company's life. First of all, how proud are you of being an independent label for 34 years? Because there's really not many of them that have had that longevity.
Well, as far as I'm aware, there's 3 left. We started in '78, and I knew then loads and loads of people that ran labels. Many of them became friends of mine. And then, if I look now, it's really the ABC that's left. There's Ace Records, Ace/Big Beat, started in '76. There is Beggars, started in '77, and Cherry Red from '78. They're the long-standing ones. There are labels like Cooking Vinyl, obviously still going, that are independent, but they started about 10 years later than us. So it's just those 3 that started from that first explosion of independent labels that started in the late '70s that are still going and are still generally independent. Rough Trade is still going. They are back independent again, but they've had different incarnations. There hasn't been a continuity there, although Jeff Travers is still at the helm there. So, you know, one has to look back and think, well, this is remarkable that you've survived all this time, because when you start a business, you don't think more than 3 or 4 years ahead. You might have your fantasies of 10 years ahead, but you can't think reality of 10, 20 years ahead. So it's a question of, are you still enjoying it? Are you doing the right things? is the challenges out there that still come along. Have you got good people around you? Do you wake up in the morning and you're excited about life? That's what it comes down to, really. And I hope for everybody at Cherry Red that's the case. If not, then go back to bed.
And do you see any parallels between the sort of climate for independent labels now and that in which you started Cherry Red back in '78?
Well, I think in a way it's a lot easier to get to the first stage now than it was then, because you've got the internet, you can get your MySpace or your Facebook, whatever, or your own website. You can put music there and you can either make it a free or a paid download, and you've got exposure straight away for a fairly small amount of money. In the days when we started, there was only 7-inch singles. There wasn't even 12-inch then. There was albums, obviously, which you had to manufacture. You had to do your sleeves and your labels all in separate plants, put it all together, have to find a distributor, find someone to promote your record, a press person, a marketing person. It was expensive. And okay, at the beginning of the whole independent label boom, there was a certain excitement and impetus that gave a lot of records some degree of energy fairly early on, but if something wasn't good, it didn't really stick. And now, so now it's easy to get started, but I think it's probably just as hard to get stage by stage. You know, I was talking to Martin Mills last week, who owns the Beggars label, I'm quite friendly with. And of course, Beggars are involved, they co-own XL,
yeah,
who have Adele. And I said to him, how did you get involved in that? He said, it's a demo tape. It wouldn't be a demo tape, obviously, it would be
CD.
It was just, yeah, we'll download. Yeah, had some demos and we all really liked it. Took it from there, and he said, I've probably spent less money on promoting that record than most other records I put out. He says, we put it in the box that says phenomenon. We don't think that's the rule, that is the phenomenon. But the great thing about this industry is you might get your own phenomenon. It might happen. Then you've got the challenge, you've got to do it right though, because people get phenomenons and blow it.
Yeah.
You've got to really do the right things.
It's how you fit that into how you operated before it came along.
And they've done that brilliantly. They've handled the phenomenon brilliantly. So you never know really, do you, where it's going to come from, where it's going to go. And that's life. That's one of the mysteries and the exciting things about life.
So if you look back across the history of the label, for you personally, would there be one or two releases that you're especially proud of?
Well, it's always a tough one, but I think I'd have to say the first tight single. Yeah, I forgot the name. That terrible
Bad
name.
Hearts.
Bad Hearts. Yeah, the EP, the street tracks. And I remember the line of it. I'll give you my heart. I'll give you my heart. That was the first line of that single. I remember seeing the band when they were unsigned in Malvern and Worcestershire, and going to the studio when they made their first single in Cheltenham. So that was a personal thing. I still play that at home sometimes. So I guess that has to stick in my mind as the first. I guess the first time I heard Dead Kennedys' Holiday in Cambodia, I just knew that was a significant record. And of course the album did go on to sell over 1 million copies worldwide. They're the two that probably stick most in my memory, and I don't want to really go beyond that, because they have special significance, and anything else is picking something out that I remember now, but it may not. If I really had the whole catalogue laid out, it may not be what I would pick.
Well, it's been a fascinating journey over the last 3 parts. I've been very privileged to be involved in some of part 3. Where do you think we're going next?
Well, I think you and Adam and a large part of the Cherry Red team have as much to say on that as I do, really. Where are we going next? We're always looking. Our overheads are high now, 11 people, quite a big office, and putting out lots of records, so we have to always keep an eye on the financial side. The great thing about it is, the excitement for me is, who walks in the door next? I was in a meeting with you yesterday, and then I went to see Adam, and he was in a meeting, and I didn't know the person in the meeting. I said, who's that? He said, oh yeah, they've offered us 100 albums. I won't name the names because it's obviously, who knows if it comes off. 100 albums, they're all names. A lot of new stuff. If that comes off, fantastic. You never know who's going to walk in the door. But what you have to do is you have to make sure you're doing all the right things to make sure the right people are walking in the door.
Yeah. And
that's the key to us at Cherry Red. You have to put all your tentacles out there and see who comes back. I just like to think we keep going, do things on our own standards, and we, as we both know, we always do things in an honourable way. We always pay people. We do the packaging well. We try and get the best sound we can on releases. We try and involve everybody who's going to appreciate a release, like the fans. If we can, we involve them at early stages to make sure we've got the best. Where we're actually going long term, I've got no idea, really, to be honest.
It's an unknown but exciting journey.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much,
Well, thanks,
Iain.
Matt, for your time and your service over the last 10 years, is it?
12 years.
12 years, there you go, yeah. Long service award, get the gold watch.
Indeed, yeah. Thank you very much. And join us more for some more label stories to come on Cherry Red TV.